Would changes to Singapore's education system fix our low fertility rate? Hi guys, I'm Natasha and welcome to another episode of The Usual Place. Now, a marriage and parenthood work group has been set up to figure out how to better support Singaporeans, from encouraging young people to find life partners to starting a family and raising children. And one of the areas of the group is focusing on is education, which is why I have Miss Jasmin Lau, who's back on The Usual Place. Now, Jasmin, you're here today because you're a member of this work group and you're also here in your capacity as Minister of State for Education. And you're also a mom of two boys, aged 3 and 5. All right, so you're going to get into the whole education system, formal schooling education system soon. And next to you on the couch, I have Miss Vivien Lim. You're a mother of 3 children who are 8, 12, and 16. So that's P3, P6, and Sec 4. So one is doing PSLE and another one is doing O-levels this year, correct? So it's a lot of stress for you. And I want to hear your experiences and hear Jasmin's point of view from the government as well. Mm-hmm. But what I want to start with is this work group. So Jasmin, the members of the interagency work group were announced yesterday. So there's 8 of you and Minister Indrani Raja is chairing the group. And what this work group does is it looks at different areas. And the reason this work group has come together is because our total fertility rate is really low. It's at 0.8 in 2025, and this is lower than the 0.97 in 2024. Now, this work group actually, in a way, is not new because there is the National Population and Talent Division under the PMO, and it was already looking at marriage and parenthood. So when Singaporeans look at yesterday's announcement and they look at this group and they'll be like, what's new?
What's new?
Yeah, and will this reset actually bring about any new changes? What do you say to that?
I've read all the online comments that came out yesterday, fast and furious. And many of them were expected because we've gone through so many rounds of trying to find and encourage people to have babies. But I would say this work group, while the headline is about the TFR, I would say this is more than that. This is also about how do you create a better Singapore for families. If in the situation that you can't raise the TFR, I think there is still some room to just explore how can Singapore just be a kinder environment for existing families with children. You have children who are a little bit older, primary school, secondary school, and the families are finding it stressful. And then you have families like mine, children are younger, different types of anxieties and stresses. So I think babies aside, there's still a lot more that can be done just to support families and children who are already born and here. So when we think about the work group, even though each of us wear a certain hat, for me it's education, maybe for Mosra Hayu, for example, is in healthcare, we come in with a certain hat, but I think we also come in with a certain network of stakeholders that we engage with very often. We come in with our own lived experiences as parents, as anxious adults who have to go through this same system. And so we hope to be able to bring all of that together to help us rethink what does it mean to build a country and an environment that makes it a bit more joyful for having families.
I mean, when you heard the number, I think I didn't say it very clearly just now, because I think in 2025, the TFR was 0.87. And when you hear this number dropping from 0.97 the year before, does it get you worried?
Yeah.
I think in a sense, I'm kind of trying to find out, is that, are you worried that it can never be reversed? Can never go back up?
I'm not very, very hopeful that it gets to where we think like replacement rate has to be, which is closer to 2. I mean, honestly, from where we are to get back there, very difficult. But I would say this is an existential question for Singapore. I'm a patriot. I love Singapore. I love what we stand for, our national identity. And if I play out that scenario where we will have less and less babies, then why am I in this job? To plan for a future of Singapore. I want to believe that there will still be a Singapore, our children and our grandchildren and their children, and that whatever we do today for the country, it gives them a good life decades on. So when I see a number like 0.87, it makes me worried, but maybe also a little sad, because will there be a country that we feel so proud of in 60 years, 120 years to come? maybe not. If there are no more of us, then what is this place for? But then it gets very, very scary when you think of it that way. And then I convince myself mentally and emotionally that never mind, don't think so far, do what you can to just support families better, and let that be the start of hopefully encouraging more people to have babies.
I love your optimism. Okay, but I have to ask you about the area of the work group you're in, so which is education. And it's a big part of anxieties that parents like Vivien have when they think about having children. So I just want to quickly find out what specific areas of education you're looking at.
What I look at in the ministry or in the work group? Well, one of the areas of stress we've picked up when we speak to many parents is just this feeling of... I think Minister Jasmin had called it arms race. But I think for many parents, it's this constant feeling that you have to make sure that your child is in the best position to succeed academically or maybe in sports and music so that they have a best chance of a good life in future. Like, it's always there at the back of your head. Every day, the decisions you make for many parents is which tuition you send them to. Is it this subject, that subject, DSA, which area, like all of it goes into this hope that they have the best chance at success possible. And that stress can be very, very overwhelming. I don't know, we will have to talk to many more people to understand, is that really the reason they don't have kids? Or is that stress something that comes in after the child is born? We were just talking about how actually preschool a bit rosy, right? So it could be actually something that sets in a little bit later, but still doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it, because it is causing many people headaches, sleepless nights, emotional stress, and I'm sure there's a different way we can handle this in Singapore.
So I want to ask Vivien about her story, because Vivien, you are the model parent now for the Singapore government because you have 3 children. But it's not easy. I mean, when you talk to parents, as Jasmin said, there are many concerns about having kids and how many kids to have, right? Because there's like things like cost of living, long work hours, and the stressful education system. How concerned were you and your husband when you were thinking about having kids and how many kids to have? What was that like for you?
Okay, so it was rather clear-cut for my husband and I. So I have 2 siblings, he has 3. So we come from relatively larger families, modern families. And when we got married, we always knew we wanted kids. How many? Of course, that was open for debate, depending on survival. So the issue of to have kids or not, that didn't feature prominently. It wasn't a big debate for us. And I think, honestly, the preschool years we were well supported. I was still working full-time. They have the childcare system, which is great because...
it's full day.
It's full day, it's full day. That really helped. And then, of course, you had the working mother credit. So we felt pretty supported during the preschool years, albeit my husband was in a very, very long, very demanding job. My kids pretty much didn't see him so much during the weekdays. So yes, we still felt adequately supported. And it's only, I think, really the pressures and the stressors are really in the primary school.
Once they start
formal schooling.
How would you describe the difference between the preschool years and the primary school years?
So I would use the word honeymoon.
So I'm in the honeymoon period.
Yeah, the preschool years are the honeymoon period. And then when you went to primary school, how would you describe it when your kids went to primary school?
Primary school was exciting, and I kudos to the government because initially they used to have assessments starting in P1.
Yeah.
They did away with that a couple of years back. So no assessments in P1 and P2.
So your Sec 4 would have gone through a different experience.
So he was in that Sec 1, P1, they would have the termly assessments already. So once they removed that, and then now P1, P2 became the honeymoon years. We say, we enjoy it now. And now my youngest, she's in P3, so we have she's just started.
So the tests have come back.
Just started, yes. And we try not to, but I really think they are useful checkpoints. I really do, because without that, with a bit of preparation, then they're not blitzed, taken aback by a test. So they prepare a little bit for it, and then the result comes back, and I can see, maybe we need to practice this a bit more. Your understanding of it is not so. I don't agree that assessments are too stressful in general, but definitely the nature of it changes once we get into late P4,
Upper primary.
P5, P6. And it becomes so much about exam preparation and teaching to the test. And that is what I feel that is maybe too stressful for the children and for the parents, because then it's all about peaking for the PSLE and the tuition. And I told Natasha, would I send them to tuition if they didn't really need it? If they were scoring consistently, I think I won't feel the need for it.
Do your kids go for
They
tuition
do,
now?
yeah. And the P6er has tuition for all subjects.
I see.
What is his day like if he has to go for tuition for all subjects? So there's 4 subjects, right? And if he has to go for tuition for every subject, what does his week or his day look like?
His day is tiring, yes, because after the day at school, lunch, and he goes to tuition. And I tell him already, you're very lucky. I see your schoolmates all in their school uniform, so they've come straight from school, they've eaten lunch on the way.
I see.
and
So
then
he
back
goes
to
home,
class. I try to make
short
sure
break,
it's a
and
short
then
break,
goes for tuition.
a shower and all that. And I tell him, you're very fortunate. Yeah,
Then tuition in the afternoon, then dinner,
Then dinner,
and then
and then-
homework.
yeah, homework, and then-
his
Does he
Yeah.
get time to play? Like, does he like sports? Does he like music? Does he do any of that?
All those are on the periphery at this point in upper primary.
Wow.
Unless it's DSA, like then of course that's like a major focal point as well. Yeah.
Does he give you feedback like in a workplace? No, but does he tell you about how he feels about having to do school and do tuition and then does he have time to do stuff that he likes or even just chill out? What does he say about
The
it?
downtime. I think he's resigned. That I tell him this is something you have to get through. Your friends are all doing it, and it is really a big milestone exam. You want to go to the school your friends are also looking at, right? And things like that. So I don't say that as a threat, but because he's a boy and he's only 12 years old, not even 12 yet, the intrinsic motivation is not quite there, right? So I'm trying to find ways to motivate him because I can't be pushing him and pulling only. And he wants to do the work. He needs to do the work and do it to the best of his ability. So I think if my kid was struggling and to get the grades, which I think is what parents are looking for, to get into schools they are familiar with, then tuition is a need, has become a need. Yeah.
So I want to
By the way, this tuition thing has extended all the way down to preschools. And it's very scary. So I thought preschool honeymoon is okay, they're just having fun in school. And then now I realize my kids' classmates in K1 are all having
Enrichment,
tuition. It's the same tuition centers, the popular ones. And then the talk, and if you want to scare yourself and you're in the group chats, they're all talking about waitlisting the kids for these classes. And the psyche is, because they're afraid of primary school and the stresses that will come, they consider why not send the kids to tuition in K1 so that by the time they reach P1, they are more than ready. And in P1, they will learn what P3s learn. And this idea of try and stay ahead so that when it comes to P6, they don't feel they have to catch up, that they'll always be sort of ready. Is it rational? It sounds rational, but the impact and the stresses that then both the children and the parents face is huge.
Starting earlier.
Yeah, and as a parent, I feel, I would say sometimes some days I do ask myself actually, and are my kids losing out because I'm insisting that they don't go for these classes? Maybe, and I think that's what a lot of parents think. If you could give, maybe you should, and maybe otherwise you would regret in future when they fall behind.
So I have to ask, because you've mentioned parent psyche and then this education arms race, and then it's about getting your kid into the right primary school and then prepping for PSLE and then doing the tuition enrichment. So Jasmin, I have to ask, how much of it is due to system and culture?
Yeah.
Or how much is it caused by parents and their need to keep their children ahead of the system?
Yeah. Well, I don't think they are separate issues. Parents think a certain way, not because they are born with a DNA to think a certain way. They and us, we grow up in a system. The system is created in the country, a lot of it through policy, and policy drives quite a lot of these behaviors. Yes. So while, yes, we can say people should have a different mindset, but my own reflection is the mindsets are shaped by policies and systems. And we would have gone through a system where your good grades got you into a good school, good grades get you in a good school, then you can access a bigger range of subjects. And then from there, you can choose to go to a JC, you get certain subjects you can choose, and then avails you to these doors that open up in university. And so we have gotten used to that. And of course, now if we have children, we naturally think that's a safer path for all of them. And then if you want parents to change their mindset, you can't just be like, hey, Vivien, think differently. You can't. The system then has to change, and then you need another generation of parents to go through the system to appreciate that things have shifted. So I wouldn't blame parents. I wouldn't say, wake up, life is, we can't. We would all have grown up through the system.
So, Vivien, I want to ask you, when you were having these kids when they were babies, and then did you ever think of what comes next? Like, did you think of the stressful education system when you were planning ahead?
I think we're cognizant of the fact that it was going to be stressful, I guess, but until you're in it, then you realize, gosh, what do I tell my friends who are about to have babies or thinking about their third and not quite in that environment yet, in that situation yet. And I think it's palpable to many couples who are thinking of having kids. I had a discussion recently with my brother, newly married. He's a bit on the older side, he's late 30s. And also with a cousin who just got married. She's 30, right? So both that sort of age.
Yeah.
And I said, are you planning to have kids? They said yes, partly because of faith. And also I said, but your friends who are not going to have kids, why do they say so? And my younger cousin said, they look ahead and they said it's just too tiring. Already the job saps them. They cannot imagine coming back and taking care of a human being. And also, the lifestyle and the changes is very daunting. So, but they can see the stress, I think, that older parents go through. And I think anecdotally, my brother came to me not too long ago and he said, Jia, so that's Chinese for older sister. He's like, do you know what's so depressing? I go to a mall on Saturday and I see the parents all sitting around idly.
Waiting for the kids to finish tuition.
For hours for the kids to finish their classes. So they look ahead and they see, this is not really, something to look forward to, and it takes out, and this becomes, I think, the focal point, not so much about the joys of family time and downtime. Because so much it's encroached upon by the pressures of really trying to get our child ready for the exams.
Well, I have to ask, so these, I don't want to call them complaints, but these stories that the government hears of parents going through this and people who are on the fence about having kids, will we actually now see concrete changes to, like, taking into feedback what Vivien and her brother and her cousin has said about this? Like, how will we see this? How do you think we will see this play out in the future?
Well, the work group is meant to get us started. You could say that the very longer term KPI is that in future, when her brother goes to the mall, he sees a different picture, right? The kids are playing in the indoor playground, and then the parents are not just sitting there waiting for the kids from tuition.
Kids, because now we see foreign kids.
So you could say there is an imagination of what life could look like in future. There has to be some near-term moves, and there are some very near-term pressures. For example, new couples not able to find a flat immediately to then settle down and then start a family. So there's some near-term things that you have to sort out. And then there are some longer-term issues like the education system that if you really want to reset, it means you have to see a generation go through it to see an outcome. So there will be some longer-term impacts that we want to start now. And you may not see the fruits of it very early, but we hope that the graduates that come out 5-10 years later, they look different, they speak differently, they communicate differently, and they look at life and success a different way. So it's a range of measures that we will have to think about. Some are immediate cost type issues, and then some are definitions of success type issues that we have to review.
So I think one of the things that parents want reviewed is the dreaded four-letter word, the PSLE.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so I've spoken to some parents about, testing and exams, and Vivien, you also mentioned it, right? And this PSLE thing just keeps coming up because it has a life, it takes a life of its own. Like when you're putting your kid through that year, right? Families restructure their lives around it. And, even some parents leave their jobs to help their kid do this exam because, as one parent put it becomes a high stakes exam for a 12-year-old. But the Ministry of Education has actually made changes, right? So there's no mid-year exams in primary schools and secondary schools since 2023. They have removed streaming. There's changes to PSLE scoring, but parental anxiety hasn't gone away. So if the system has already changed, Jasmin, why do you think parents are still stressed about this?
I mean, my earlier point is we grew up in a certain system. We grew up meaning we spent, 6, 10, 12 years or more in a system. Many of the changes we've made in recent years are over the past 3 to 4 years. The aggregate bands for PSLE, full subject-based banding in secondary school, letting people study at their own pace, take subjects at different levels. These are quite recent changes. So to expect parents who have been shaped by a decade or more of lived experience to say, oh, we've made some moves, please change your mindset, I would say tall order. I think many parents still believe in their own lived experience and feel that if that helped us succeed in a certain way, then maybe that should be what the kids go through. But directionally, you're right, that's where we are heading. And you can see separate pieces of the puzzle moving. PSLE scores, how we band them, secondary subjects, how we take them. Now you go to JC, I think your score is made up of 5 subjects and not 6, so that some are just really weak in a last subject. You're not forced to use that subject. You see all these pieces of the puzzle, they're moving towards the same direction. And what we want to try to signal to parents is if the education system is moving that way, which means that our definition of what a PSLE score would lead you to would change, then we hope that parents start to rethink what they do with their kids in the earlier years. But we'll take cohorts of parents to go to before that really sinks in. And I think someone like Vivien, who has seen kids go through the system at different ages, maybe she can see some of those changes happening, but some of it would help her youngest child, but may not be in time to help the oldest one.
Is your P3 girl, is she less stressed than, let's say, your oldest or your son?
Well, I mean, she's really just at the beginning of her assessment, journey. So she is less stressed now. And I think for many of the primary schools, really the pressures really start in the upper primary. Yeah. So she's relatively immune to it now.
For now.
So I feel that, yes, all the changes have been good, but still not enough really to galvanize a change in the thinking of the mindset. And I feel that it's the nature of the exam, and also because it ranks every single 12-year-old. They're very young, and then it ranks every secondary school. So, and then you get matched that way. So I feel ultimately it ends up being a very transparent report card that reflects on the child, on the parent, the school, and the teachers, right? So because it's so transparent, like how the secondary schools are ranked. So, for instance, someone will say, oh yes, my daughter got into RGS. Immediately, a parent might know she scored 90 and above in probably all her subjects. Oh, he didn't make it back to SJI. Oh, he must have gotten maybe below 80s for some subjects. It is so transparent. And can you imagine being, let's just say if an employee had his performance review, and then the following financial year, everyone sits according to their performance grade. That is so stressful, isn't it?
Also for self-esteem.
Yes,
for
the confidence
12,
of the children.
13-year-old child.
And frankly, I think for my son, he doesn't really care what the final score is, but will he be able to see a lot of his friends in Sec 1? That's his concern.
Because they all separated after...
Well, I mean, he's already in
clustering.
an affiliated school, so but there's a chance he cannot make it back to the school where a lot of his friends are. So that's a real fear that the child feels, I think, more so than the prestige.
But I mean, there are parents who find the examinations, all that, stressful and wish that part could change. And then sometimes when we talk to parents, some come back and ask us, why did you take away the exams in P1 and P2?
Yes.
And if you didn't test my child, what would spur my child on? And then what's that motivational factor? Why is there no homework? Why are you not? And that if we don't test them in school, then they go for the tuition that gives them the test and the exam. And which is why we felt for education, we need to spend a bit more time just listening to parents and stakeholders and educators in the system this year and get a sense of where's that balance to be struck. You need some kind of sorting because we all understand that the sorting does help both the high ability learners and the slower ones. To force them all to learn at the same pace also doesn't help. So some sorting mechanism actually could help everyone learn at a pace suitable for them. But then how do you have a sorting mechanism that doesn't end up being a self-esteem mechanism? That is harder to figure out.
It's a blunt tool, I feel. And
Yeah.
for those parents, yes, we have I know parents who said, oh, they take away the mid-years. How are they going to prepare for them? But because, again, in their mind, all preparation must be done for the
For the
PSLE.
exam, yeah.
So if you took away the mid-years and the PSLE, then you'd be like, okay, so we'll just do this termly one. That's fine. But
Yeah.
they feel that, you are removing that preparation mode and then they are not able to peak.
Yeah, because
again
that's still the biggest
for
milestone
yes,
that they have to
still
cross.
for the big exam. Yeah.
So I do have a question from another parent, and probably is a feedback point. So he is quite frustrated with the system because the PSLE, as we said, is a very
Yeah.
high stakes exam, right? And he said if the curriculum is not designed to teach kids real world skills,
Yeah.
and if we're all testing them if we're all preparing them for that one big exam, then what is the point of it? Like, why are we putting parents and kids through this anxiety? And so basically to him, getting graded just to go into a secondary school just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So when you hear this, what do you think, Jasmin?
Well, I would definitely welcome him to join the education conversations for a start. Now, I mean, many adults who are now in the workforce can see the speed of change in industry and technology and can understand that knowledge accumulation as a skill isn't so relevant anymore. I mean, you just ask one of the generative AI bots, you get the knowledge, right? So many adults can feel, it's very palpable, knowledge doesn't give you an itch. And we are starting to see other things give you an edge. The ability to speak, to persuade, to convince, work with a team, to lead. These things that previously we call soft skills, but actually now are even more precious. Soft usually gives people a feeling like not so important.
essential,
Yeah.
yes,
But now these become a lot more prized and important. So the working adults can feel it. And so then now they want their kids, as they go through school, to develop those skills because that they know that will give their kids an edge. So we want to put all that into the education system, which also means that over time, as we review the way we test and assess, those elements start to have to appear. But the education system will always lag industry around the world. It will take time to change out curriculum, testing methodologies. The educators must be trained to deliver education differently. So there will always be a lag. And I don't think that angst will ever fully be resolved. There will always be this feeling of, is our education system able to keep up? But we must try our best to shorten the lag so that the parents feel a bit more assured that their kids are picking up skills that give them a chance in the future economy. I don't think that parent you mentioned will ever feel that, oh, great, now we are there. Very hard. But the assurance we want to give them is we want to try to narrow that gap.
Okay. I will let him know by sending him this podcast. But I have to ask, are there further structural changes to education? Are they being considered right now with the work group? Because I know that the report will be out next year, but then technically in between, the work group can recommend that changes can be made.
I mean, whether it's through the education conversations, MOE will review, we are quite open. I mean, the range of ideas that have come in are quite diverse. People who are convinced you still need some kind of sorting mechanism are suggesting why not you just pool and lengthen primary school to maybe age 14 or 15, at the age where the kids emotionally a bit more able to handle
The rigor
what
of-
looks like,
yes,
and also
a
what looks
high-stake
like a bad
exam.
score.
Yes.
at it.
Yes,
So you
yes.
could stretch it out, and then at 14, 15 now, they go into what is currently known as secondary school that continues for another 4 years, and then the second exam. So you could still have PSLE as a sorting. You wouldn't call it primary school because it kicks in later. But understanding the psychology and the emotions behind it, you could drag it out. Yes, it's a huge reset because you then have to think about primary school lasting 8 years instead of 6. Teachers and the rushing, all of that changes, but all possible. And we are trying our best not to lock ourselves in and say, just because the system is like that, we can't touch and we can't shift. If you wanted to make smaller tweaks, you could tweak the score bands, the aggregate level band. You could tweak all those in many, many different ways. Some people also said, what if you don't have even that P1 registration? What if you just say everyone goes to the school nearest your home? So a lot of people are suggesting significant resets.
Yes.
And we are trying to unpack those into what are the elements underneath. So, for example, why let people just go to school nearer their home? What is the thinking behind that? Is it because logistically it's also a stressor for parents to think about sending kids somewhere and then not having transport? When you
School
unpack
buses are
that,
expensive.
when you unpack that, then it's easier to understand what's the underlying stressor and how do you remove it.
So I want to ask Vivien about your experience because you are a stay-home mom and you left the workforce when you had your third child.
When I had my third, yes.
Why did you feel like you had to do that?
Firstly, my eldest, he was in primary school, just started, and he wasn't settling as well as I had hoped. And that's number one. Number two, as I had mentioned before, my husband had a very demanding job, and he was mostly not at home. So, and the nature of my job at that time, I was in finance, and it would be a front face. It's a front office job, so I would not be able to be staying at home, working remotely for a good part of it to be good at the job. So, so that confluence of factors, I thought that it's probably time to take a step back. I hope to be able to continue doing other things, but that horizon keeps getting pushed back because this exam and then that exam. Yes.
Was it like a quick decision or like you stewed, like you had the thought and then had to think about it over a long period of time before
So
you
I think
decided?
percolating at the back of my mind, and then I think it didn't percolate too long, and then I decided. I think I'm not a very patient person. I do not have the bandwidth. I see ahead what people are experiencing. I said, I don't think I can work, and then really have the patience and the bandwidth after that for things, spellings, and going through his work and things like that, which I knew was what was in store for me.
Yeah.
And you're okay with this? Do you miss the workforce?
I did. I really did. Now it's a bit better. Now I'm very busy with other things, but definitely this was just before COVID. So that time, the flexible arrangements were not really,
Available.
in sight.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have to ask because Jasmin, we are here talking about the TFR, right? I mean, what does this actually look like for couples, particularly women, who see parents angsting about the system? And we often hear of female colleagues or friends who leave their job, which I mentioned earlier, not because they want to, but they feel like they need to help their kids, get through the education system and particularly like exam prep. So they kind of like have no choice. And then when you have a young woman who's going to get married or thinking about getting married and thinking about having children, and she sees this picture and she's like, actually I spent a lot of time on my career. Put in a lot of effort to climb the ladder. And then you're like, what? I have to potentially think about giving it up. Then how do you, placate those fears that it might need to happen?
Yeah. There is no national message that you can send out to all women out there that would work. I don't believe in it. I also don't believe in trying to tell women like, career is not so important, other things are. No, it's just a personal journey that we all sometimes stumble into or sometimes intentionally start on that. And I just want to say, for myself, the anxieties are not very different. Some people may say, oh, career-wise, you look like you have made it or you're at a certain level, but the anxieties around parenting don't change. So I have the same thoughts. So my child would be P3 if we're thinking about next election cycle. Same thoughts, well, if they don't settle in well enough in primary school, at lower primary, that's still a good chance that you can help them settle better. I mean, I don't know whether it's the same way you process it, but that's how it works in my head. If they're in upper primary already, very hard, because then they start on this whole PSLE prep and all that, and the social adjustments are harder. So then I'm also thinking, if they're lower primary, should I, at that point, take time out to be the stay-at-home mom? Because that's hugely important for the kid at that young age. So it doesn't matter what kind of career stage you're in, what kind of role you're in, minister, not minister, same anxieties throughout.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Would this be a very big factor in the next general election? Because you just started out, but as you said, that your kids will be of a certain age at the next G, which is in about 4 years. Would you
personally,
not run?
It's huge. Personally, it's huge, and I would not approved by PM or anything, but it's a real question that we ought to have, and I do not shy away from saying this is the same anxiety that every parent has. And in some case, right now, my job, I'm accountable to my residents, to cabinet, to the prime minister. In other people's jobs, they are accountable to their boss, supervisor, CEO, whatever. Same thought processes. I want my child to have the best chance of success. It could mean that when the child is lower primary, I need to make the hard decision.
So you walk away from it to focus on your kids?
If they're not doing well, you have to. And I think then you play it back to the young couple, and then that freaks them all out, because what do I have to even process that? Why do I want to start on a journey that requires me to even process that decision when the time comes? It's extremely scary. And so then the easier path is, let's just not get into it. Let's not even start on kids. You know what? I think the dog is a better idea, because,
they're cute.
and I can love it, and this is my fur kid, and so the dog doesn't require me to step away from the job. And I think that's the situation we are caught in. Will we arrive at a day where the minister can say, I'm just going to step back for a while, help my kid primary school, I'll come back later, and please accept me into this job again? Same thing in the company. Will we arrive in a situation where every worker can say, every parent can say, I'm going to step back for a while, 18 months time I might come back, I might not, please save the job for me? There is no promise. And I don't think as a society we can say, yeah, we'll all do that, hold the places there. We can't, because we are accountable to the company, to the country as a leader. And it does require many of us to make very difficult decisions about priorities in life. And Vivien has been courageous enough to make that decision. And there will be more like her who may choose, but who also may later on feel some loss. Or I want to go back, but can't quite figure out what's the best way to step back. And then there'll be people like me who feel we want to be like her, but we maybe can't, or feel scared or feel stressed about doing so. I think best we can do is to help everyone see very clearly there are many paths that you could take. All of it gives us some joy and some stress, and then help the younger adults make those choices wisely. I wish we could speak more about the joys of parenting, because it is actually very meaningful. On a happy day, we are out with the kids. It's indescribable.
Do you think we don't talk about it enough?
Personally, I think we don't talk about it enough.
Do you think, Vivien, asked you, the stresses of it, just sometimes it just is too much to be like, oh, my kid's cute. What do you think? Like, does this consume you a lot, the anxieties of parenting?
Actually, this is very interesting, because I was just reading a book review by I think To Yu Yen's latest book.
Unease.
Yes,
Yeah.
at Unease. And it's about actually academic pressures and parents are feeling. And she said in her countless interviews with parents, she said it was a little sad that in many of those conversations, not many brought up the joys of familyhood and parenting. In fact, it was very much on the stresses and the anxieties of it. And coming back to what you said also about mothers wanting to take a step back to prioritize the children, especially if they're not settling well. And I think that's absolutely understandable. And but I guess the shame is if mothers are taking a step back from their careers just to get through their kids through an exam.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I think
that I agree.
that's
I think
really a
people,
shame.
people feel like, just for exam, I
Yeah.
have to like leave my
Yeah.
job to help them get through it. I mean, you're
Yeah.
kind of like torn between like wanting to help your children, but also like your professional life, right? So I can
Yeah.
understand why people feel this sense
It's
of
very
like, loss.
conflicting, and people on the outside of that situation will not understand. But because it's not like when it comes to upper primary and PSLE, you cannot just outsource the fully to the
Yeah.
tuition teacher and say, "Yeah, I'm okay. You sort out his math. He needs to get an AL1."
Yeah.
Thanks. You can't. So
Yeah.
you sit down with the child, you still make sure they're on top of things. And so there's a lot of work that goes behind it, outside of the tuition
Yeah.
as well. So, and then I just wanted to circle back to that point about, I think, career advancement, career disruptions, and how it affects women's inclination to have kids or to have more kids. So there are some who, I've got many high-flying friends. So one way they go about it is that they delay
Yeah.
having children until they are that senior,
Yeah.
that when they know when they have the child and they will need to be flexible,
Yeah.
they are of that seniority where it's no issue.
Yeah.
Nobody will question where she is.
Yeah.
So they are pushing back motherhood to maybe late 30s,
Yeah.
late 30s, 40. And then, of course, then naturally, your runway to have more children,
That was a bit like me.
your runway to have more than one or two or three is very tough. Right?
Yeah.
So naturally, that window is much shorter.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So I often tell people I feel a little bit more blessed at this point because financially we're doing okay. We're a lot older, moved up over the years. So then now, anytime we think about what if I took a bit of time off or that, feels a little bit easier because at least the immediate pressures are not there. But I had my first child at 38, the second one at 40. I want a third child, but I'm 43. The window is so
Tight, huh?
it's so tight, and the physical changes that the women's body goes through, like, I mean, it takes a while to get back on that.
Yes.
Now you have so much fewer years to think about it, but you cannot rewind. That's the problem. You can't say, oh wait, I made a mistake, I wish I could start early. You can't. So you're left with just X number of years, and then it goes into this other question around fertility support and all the signs and the costs that go into it, which is also not easy to manage.
I mean, I guess it is the system we're currently in. Of
Yeah.
course, we're talking about changes. But Vivien, I want to ask you, when you think about what your kids will grow up to become, what actually worries you the most?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. Right now, my son is in O levels, and just looking at the post-secondary options, and also agentic AI and all, it's constant, right? The barrage about what AI is able to do, me beating the best chess grandmaster. So, and of course, even personally, my husband and his colleagues and my friends who are in the workforce say it's so much easier to tell the AI what to do than an intern or a fresh grad. So the worry is that actually it really is, are we equipping them correctly? It's not what they know very much now, but really how they're thinking outside the box, connecting invisible dots and then coloring outside the lines, creativity and application of what they know, right? And of course, communication, I think, So I am very worried, and also we are very in that generation where last time the desirable careers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very quite, well known, very
Doctor,
familiar.
lawyer.
Yeah, lawyer. Yeah.
Now it's like AI's coming. That's the last episode we watched. AI's coming for your job. But I mean,
I've been listening to talks about how to future-proof your
children.
Yes, your children's careers
Yeah.
and things like that to see that, because we want to give them the best possible advice. Yeah. So
I mean, knowing what you know now, do you think you would still have 3 kids?
There's a lot of joy in having children. Yeah. And I started young, so maybe the energy level was different because I think speaking to friends who have kids older and choose to only have one or stop at most two is the energy levels.
Yes.
And they are, and I think this again, actually, sorry to sound like a, to repeat, but again, it might come down to the tuition, the enrichment culture that we have here, which drains the household expenses. And it's tiring because the parents are using their free time or their downtime to take the kids to this center and to that center. So that feeds into the notion that having children very expensive, very tiring. Yeah, I think not just the childcare, but
it's even more tiring for a parent to attempt to do that all themselves at home. Because then the parent will still feel, okay, my child's not going to tuition. I should be the tuition teacher. I need to sit down with the child. And for the working parents, it's impossible. It's
mind
energy.
Yes, the
So
energy.
to give you an example, I was thinking about it. So if you have 24 hours a day, right? So eight fingers, each finger 3 hours. Then you chop off 9 hours work, 9 hours they sleep. Maybe you're left with 3-4 hours, 3-4 hours with the kids. And then you come back from work and you're like, I just want to take a break.
Netflix.
Yeah, but in those 3 hours, it's very precious because you have a child. And in 24 hours, you only have 3 hours with the child. So then you need to think in the 3 hours, how much is fun? How much is, skills upgrading? Teach them something useful. Then how much is just routine like hygiene, brush teeth, shower, feed, dinner, eat your food.
Yes.
And then you feel like in those 3 hours, are you really getting quality time with a child? And then it's all wrapped up in a ball of, I tried my best to teach them something, but they didn't really enjoy it. They don't really want to play, but then I force them to study them and everyone goes to sleep. You're like, did I really do what's best for my child? Then the parent goes to sleep. If the guilt wakes up the next day, it repeats itself, left 3 hours. And that part, I think, is where many of us feel very trapped. And then when we describe that to a young adult, it convinces them that's not the life they want. So it's the reset also requires to think: is it really 3 hours that we should have with our kids? Should it be more? And if it's more, how do you make it happen? And if it's more, how do you make sure that time doesn't just end up being sucked into send the kid for tuition, send the kid for badminton and so on? What would you then use that time for?
So I think you're the knowing what you know about how parents' cycle works in a day, right?
Yeah.
So you are the best person to answer this question.
I'm scared already. The question
I'm sure
is-
you came to this group with ideas. So if you could fix one piece of the education system today you can make one change, which would help couples actually change their mind on kids, what would it be?
I don't think changing the education system really will change whether or not adults decide to have kids. I don't. I mean, it's a personal view. I don't think education is the part that makes them decide on the conception or even maybe marriage and then planning a family. I don't think that's the biggest question mark they have. I do think that once adults start to have maybe one kid, the education experience may convince them whether they go on to have the second kid or not. So the +1 and the +2, that's key. I do believe very strongly in the value of having siblings. So I do think for families who have one, it would be fantastic if they move on to have 2 or 3, because there's a sibling relationship that shapes a child's experience from young. They learn interactions at home, how to share what's unkind behavior. All these things they learn also at home and they also learn it in school. So I think what you can do with the education system could convince people to have more or stop, but maybe not the first kid. So then when it comes to what are the changes we can make to the education system, I mean, as a parent, I would say no PSLE is great. Then I don't know, my child, when they reach P6, don't have to feel so stressed. But I think a better way is to still have a sorting mechanism, but the entry into secondary school doesn't feel like a cliff for many of our students. It could mean, like I mentioned just now, pushing the sorting a little bit later when students and parents emotionally better able to understand why sorting is necessary and why it doesn't lock them into a certain path. I think that could help. I also think that the university curriculum and the education there will have to change, because now it's about different human skills that we need to teach the students. And maybe in future you wouldn't see subjects so clearly cut out as electrical engineering, very, very clear subjects. Maybe you see a lot more common modules that all students should be prepped for before they go out to a real world. Then the stakes don't feel so high, because it's not specialties that you have to sort yourselves into in order to get to a job out there. You would then all be taking human skills type classes, because everything else about knowledge you can get from AI.
So you mentioned something that education is not exactly like the biggest stumbling block for people who want to have kids or want to get married and are thinking about kids. What do you think is the biggest thing stopping people from having kids right now, particularly Singaporeans?
I have my own theory about this. I think a lot of our people have tasted a good and rich life at a younger age, and the thinking is, I don't want to give that up. I mean, then they look at the parents who talk about parenthood like in such a stressful way. It feels like a loss. Like for them to think about having children feels like a loss, because they have to cut something out from their life. They have to cut travel or the size of the house they buy, the type of car that they would have. Like, it feels like they have to lose something in order to have a child. I think that's what's stopping many young adults from thinking about children, because it's already so hard to enjoy what they have now. They have worked so hard to get to where they are. Finally, they can taste a little bit of the sweetness of life. And then to go into a phase of life where you have to give up some of that, I think that's what's stopping a lot of adults from thinking about the next step. Now, is there a solution for that? Very hard. I don't think around the world people have figured out how to deal with that. I mean, that theory that I've mentioned. I do think that if many more of us just talk about the fulfillment from parenting, the joys of it, it could shift the concepts about it a little bit. So you can tilt someone from 50-50 to, all right, let's give it a shot. You could shift it a bit. Will we rescue the TFR to 2.0? No, I don't think so. But I think if more of us just shared about what family life could look like and how our own lives have been enriched by our children, and how our children have taught us so much more about life than we could otherwise teach ourselves, then maybe you have some people who start to consider why not. And some people who reach a stage of their career where it feels like they are there, but there's something empty. You hope that at that point they think, how about having a child? Maybe that would help.
So, Vivien, you were going to say?
Yes, I think definitely we could move the needle on that. But I guess because right now, maybe it's perceived by the couples as well, and unfortunately it's evident to them. The dominant theme of childhood and parenting and young family life, a lot of it revolves around exams and stress. Yes. So that's the dominant topic of conversation. You get together with a group of married friends with kids and you're single, I think you'd be like, oh my God, why are they talking about the best reading class? And
the chat groups are like, your kids going for phonics, or your kids going which school?
I'll send you this tutor's number. Don't share with everyone, okay? So this perpetuates so much anxiety and becomes a dominant theme. And I think that really does put people off. And then we don't have enough space to talk about and share about really the simple joys of having a child. And how much you grow as a person when you have a child. Actually, you learn so much more about yourself.
That one you have to like sit us down for another 3 hours, and slowly after
like
we
tease it out
finish
of these.
angsting, then we will get to. But the kids are so cute and they teach us so much.
Yes,
like you have to peel away all the stress first before we then start to talk about all the joys.
All right.
But I think what's obvious to many people in society, first and foremost, is like the stressful nature of it. Yeah, which is a shame.
Yeah.
All right. Well, given us a lot of food for thought.
Have we convinced you?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Oh,
Not
we need
really.
3
Let me
hours
let me
with
re
you.
let me
3 hours
rewatch
more.
this episode. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground today, and it sounds like we need to reframe how we think about parenthood. And I want to thank Vivien very much for sharing your story, and Jasmin for being very candid about what the work group is gonna do. So thank you both for being here today. And that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. And if you have thoughts on what we just discussed, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next Thursday.